You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Acuna Capital. Known as the new wave in tech and trading, Acuna is a leading derivatives market maker in traditional asset classes. As one of the first trading firms to make markets on Bitcoin futures, Acuna is also proud to be an innovator in the cryptocurrency space. Through a collaborative flow of knowledge between developers, quants, and traders, Acuna designs and implements their own low-latency technologies, trading strategies, and mathematical models. To learn more about our rapidly growing firm, please visit acunacapital.com. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program where we go beyond our traditional world of your Apples and your Teslas and your SPYs and your Facebook options and all that fun stuff, and look a little bit farther afield out there into the world of your crypto derivatives. Going to talk the volume, the volatility, the unusual activity, the skew, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-evolving Options Insider Radio Network. For all of you who've joined us on the pro side, another great pro Q&A coming up tomorrow. We're going to talk all things on the commodity options front with one of the legends in the game over there, Mr. Dan Grams. And maybe we'll get a chance to dip our toes into all things crypto as well. They are now trading over there at CME on the futures and sometimes on the options side as well. So if you want to join us on that front, maybe just learn more about what's going on the pro side, go to theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. You sign up there, you can get access to the pro Q&As, our options oddities on Fridays, a whole bunch of other fun stuff there in between. And speaking of fun stuff, a lot of fun stuff in store for us on the show today. So let's get to it as we roll out the Crypto Hot Seat.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat, the portion of the show we welcome on guests from throughout the world of crypto and indeed beyond, and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. And today's guest is a returning offender here on the show, even though it's been a little while since he's been on. And Mr. BRYAN, now the CEO over there at Digital Asset Investment Management. BRYAN, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Good to talk to you again.
Sounds like congratulations are in order. A little bit of a title change since the last time you were on, sir. Now bumped up all the way to CEO, sir.
Yeah, a bit of marketing and updating the brand. We're now 3 years old and going through when I founded the business, managing director, getting things started, and, really taking the lead there and building out the team as it grows. So, yeah, thank you.
BRYAN, a lot has changed in the world of crypto since the last time you joined us. The last time you were on with us was all the way back in the primordial ooze days of April 20th of last year. That's an eternity, a lifetime in the world of crypto. Listeners, just to give you some frame of reference, Bitcoin was well below 10,000. It was around 7,500 the last time we checked in with you, Bryan. So maybe let's start there. Obviously, the pandemic was still nascent. We were still just beginning this whole lockdown thing. Lots changed since then, Bryan. So maybe let's start there. Catch us up. What has the last year and change been like for you guys over there at Digital Asset Investment Management, as we've seen Bitcoin and almost everything else skyrocket, particularly in the beginning of this year, and then in the last month or two kind of come back down the other side, Bryan?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So let's go back a little bit further, and I'll remind the listeners where we built the firm, and the reason behind it was, coming from the traditional space and a vol background myself, I realized that there was a need for, sophisticated traditional investors to have something to relate to in the digital asset space and somebody to help manage positions for them. So that was the whole foundation of this business, and to do it from a regulatory standpoint. And that's what we do. We help individuals and institutions get into this space and manage their digital assets. So coming into when we last spoke, we were coming right on the back of the pandemic and the sharp sell-off in March, not only in the capital markets, but also here in crypto. And like you said, it was trading below 10,000. But we had firm belief in the space. I've been in Bitcoin for a while, October 2014, and just kind of knowing the history and the cycles and the halvening coming. That's really the narrative we ran. We had quite a few leads out, and people still wanted to be educated, but kind of wanting to know where the price was going to go. And really at that time, we were pushing hard saying, you got to get allocated. You got to get into this space. That these are great levels and the halvening's coming, and it's going to be, you're going to see rewards to this in the back half of the year. So when we came into summer, people started listening. They kind of moved away from, the scariness of coronavirus, but also looking as a hedge, a way to get away from the inflationary properties and to find something more finite to invest in. So we actually did really well. The firm grew quite a bit. A lot of those clients that we spoke to ended up putting on positions. They got great levels at those times, and our client base actually swelled a lot too. So that led us into the fall, which was really, post-halvening. It started to show, even the halvening you recall was a bit boring, where it kind of just traded below 10,000 there shortly after that.
Yeah, the halvening kind of gets lost in the sea of other things that have happened over the course of the last year and a half.
It does, but it was a really monumental thing. And, now we're just a little over 1,000 days out from the next one. And that might sound like an eternity when I say that, but it's out there, and you got to look at it as an event again. And this will relate to longer dated leaps in call options and what could happen. So these are things to consider in it. These are big events in the space. So the halvening was monumental, right? And it showed, and here we are now. So that's where we've been.
Yeah, it has to be just as you mentioned, kind of a complete tonal shift for you guys, because your last appearance, April of that time frame, we were just coming off the heels of that aggressive 30% intraday sell-off in Bitcoin. I have to imagine a lot of the people you're targeting over there at your firm, which are of course the registered investment managers, a lot of them were probably pretty skittish about getting into this space, seeing it sell off intraday 30% and fast forward a year and change. I'm sure a lot of them were probably on the other side of that. They're probably beating a path to your door there, Bryan, saying, hey, we want to get in. We want to get in on this space. So has it been a market shift? Have you seen a lot of the people in the RIA and asset management space become more receptive to this over the course of the past year and change?
Yes. And it starts really from the education standpoint, where prior to this year and even in the summer and the halvening, there was a lot of still fear from those advisors, a lot of it from a regulatory standpoint. And specifically when they want to change their filings, whether it be their ADV or their brochure, the question really becomes, are they a fiduciary and able to speak appropriately on this topic and these assets well enough to advise their clients? And that really was no. That was the answer. So they realized that, and they needed to be educated. And when it comes to education on this, the part that really stands out a bit is that the digital assets are quite tangible. It's not like they trade on every platform. If you're an advisor for Wells Fargo and you're using their platform, it's not on there and you can't get it. So little things like that, and educating them on how it works and the wallets and cold storage is the foundation that often gets overlooked, but a place to start. So once they start wrapping their heads around that,
And as the market moved on and MicroStrategy did its thing, these guys started to really come in fast as their clients started to ask them more questions. And I've seen some of the advisors that we talk to, and they have their internal monthly meetings. The topic that always comes up, and it's been this way, I could say at least for 6 months, has been Bitcoin and digital assets. And they need to know about it at least a little bit to have the conversation with their clients, because that's the only thing their clients really want to talk about. So we're seeing, an absolute growth in the interest level from the asset managers and registered investment advisors in the space.
All right, so you kind of touched on my next question there. The question everyone kind of has is it still Bitcoin leading that conversation, or are the asset managers starting to come to you looking at other things, maybe ETH or even further down the crypto chain there, Bryan?
I'm going to tell you honestly, and I wish it was still Bitcoin, but we get a lot of requests lately, even into the run up, and then still a little bit now on altcoins, even beyond Ether.
Please don't tell me it's all Doge. Please don't tell me it's Doge lighting up your tape these days.
That's 1 out of 9 requests, but it goes further down the list. And it's a bit unfortunate because it does just seem like they're alpha hunting, to make up something in it. And being advisors that they are, I would hope they would know better, that they got to start with a core position in Bitcoin for themselves and their clients. But there probably needs to be some kind of turnover here. I think last noted on CoinMarketCap, there was 11,000 different digital assets. It just going down there and penny stock hunting is not the right way to go. So unfortunately but we always revert back. And sometimes that's a tough conversation to have with advisors, as they feel like, they want to do the best and they want to gap right ahead, or their clients are even asking for these altcoins to kind of bring them back around to, Bitcoin's the foundation. It might sound boring right now, but you got to trust it. And this is the way to go first to get started in this space.
So let's get into that a little bit, because you touched on the kind of the plumbing in the business. It isn't the sexiest thing, but we encounter this a lot. We do programming aimed at the advisor space on this network called The Advisor's Option. One of the most frequent complaints we hear from a lot of that audience is it's hard for them to onboard options. Their platform holder it's not set up to account for options or to allow options trading beyond very basic type positions. That problem is compounded tenfold when you start trying to add things like crypto into the asset mix. Who's their custodian? Like you mentioned, teaching them about wallets. There's a whole order of magnitude of new complications that are added to that. So it sounds like you guys, Bryan, over there at DAIM have launched some partnerships recently to try to streamline that process a little bit.
Yeah, one of them is with a company called Blockchain. They're great guys over there, and they basically have a front-facing platform that ties back into exchanges and wallets that will allow for an advisor to tap into this space. That also allows them to bring a bunch of clients in bulk, so it's not so manual with the paperwork that needs to be done. And then once they're onboarded through the platform, they can choose different layers of things to do, whether it be a sub-advisory or a TPAM. Under a TPAM, these advisors are actually able to pick from different portfolios, and we're one of the portfolios that's in this platform. So they can basically, in essence, sub out the risk. And they can get this done, and they can get these positions on, and we can run a model portfolio. We can report with statements, and then we can asset manage all these separately managed accounts from one standpoint on our side as the asset manager. So a product like this, it's really good. It's here to help people. It's here to help the advisors. It's here to help their clients, and it does it in a way that's very, very transparent. It just takes a little bit more education to the advisor side and a little bit of effort, which they all need to do, and can be hard to understand. This is off platform, but it's worth doing because it's the future. So yeah, that's one of the partnerships that we have in place, and we're looking forward to growing with these guys and bringing more advisors into the space and a bulk of their clients. Some things can be done one-off here and there if an advisor's got 1 or 3 clients that want to come in on an SMA basis, but if the advisor's got multiples of 10 or 50 or 100, and they have discretionary over these accounts and they want to open them in bulk, this is the way to do it. Blockchain is great for this.
I like it. And the way to do it with the rest of the show, Bryan, which you have ably, bravely, some might say foolishly, volunteered to dive into, as well as we kick things off with the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show we break down exactly that, what's been going on in the world's leading digital asset, aka Bitcoin. And, you know, we were off last week for the July 4th holiday here in the U.S., so a couple of weeks back, that was our last episode of the Crypto Rundown, and net show to show over the course of that 2 weeks hasn't been a heck of a lot of change. We're off not quite 1,000 handles here coming into show, about 983 to be precise from our last show. Over the course of the last week, had a little bit more of a range out there. Bitcoin got as high as about 35,000, a little bit north of that, and down to about 32,000 coming into today's show. Was about 33,111. Looks like it has sold off a little bit more since then, dropped down to 32 and change, now back up to around the 33,000 level. So like they say in Bitcoin land, if you don't like the price, just wait 2 minutes. It'll be somewhere else entirely out there. Of course, that speaks to vol, and we were seeing a lot more vol on the screen the last time we got together here on the show. The 1 hour volatility, remember all this analytics, the volatility, everything else you guys love coming at you, courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility, aka GVol. Check it out for yourselves. GVol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. You can see all this I'm going to break down and a whole heck of a lot more. If you're even mildly intrigued in this space, you want to check it out for yourselves. GVol.io is the place to go. If you do that, you can see these analytics, like the 1 hour average volatility they put together over there. Last show, it was still threatening triple digits. It was at about 97%. Coming into today's show, he's actually getting down into the high 70s, 79 and change out there. So a lot of the vol coming off, still frothy, still a volatile asset compared to most of your traditional equity options out there, but not quite as frothy as it has been of late. Remember, we had Simon Ho of T3 on the show a few weeks back as well. He's created the new Bitcoin VIX, as he likes to refer to it, aka BitVol. That was at about a 103 on our last show. And coming into today's show, it's at about an 88.5. So maybe, Brian, we'll start there. Maybe some of our newer listeners may not know, but you actually, before you were hanging out in the world of all things crypto, you actually cut your teeth in the world of options trading. So all this, the vol and all the other movement, not exactly new to you. What's been catching your eye out there over the course of the past few weeks that we've seen Bitcoin kind of vacillate around this low 30,000 level, and also as we've seen the volatility continue to come in, Brian?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of those days on the New York Stock Exchange in the options pit. So yeah, those days haven't left me, and I look back on things now and I relate to them back here with Bitcoin and what's going on. And what stands out a lot is the open interest and the volumes kind of coming off these exchanges in the last few weeks. And some people are saying that the next move is going to be more, supply demand based more than leverage based into where we go. I continue to think that we're still going to be in the boring side. I could see vol coming off even a little bit more into this, and then leading into the next charge would again be futures and options. You've noticed that downtrend in the open interest, right? And the volumes coming off on these exchanges has been, kind of the boring story tell here, where I think it does got to revert back, and we got to build back into that before prices start moving again.
Yeah, that has been the narrative for our last few episodes. Let's see, spoiler alert, if it's continuing today. Brian's already kind of let the cat out of the bag. It is. Coming into this, let's look at the SKEW really quickly. On our last show, the 30-20 SKEW. Remember, listeners, that's the entire strip of the 30 to 20 delta options. If you don't know what the heck we're talking about there, check out some of our educational programs on the network, in particular Options Bootcamp. I know a lot of you love that one, as well as Options Playbook Radio. Those two will take you down that rabbit hole as far as you would like to go. But on our last show, it was -4, almost -4.5. And coming into today's show, it's about positive about a half a point. So it's kind of swung dramatically in the other direction. In terms of the open interest, as Brian was kind of alluding to, not a lot of action over the last 2 weeks from a net OI perspective. The calls were about 75,600 of those open on our last show. Or actually on today's show, that's up about 3,500 or so from last show, but not a huge change. The puts about 46,500, up about 1,500 or so from last show. So once again, calls have outpaced the puts. Some of that, of course, having been the fact that we've sold off so hard over the course of the past few months out there in Bitcoin that we've blown through a lot of those put strikes. So people logically and sanely took a lot of those off. So that's one of the reasons why we've seen the put numbers kind of drop a bit, and they haven't really had a reason to reestablish yet as we kind of keep vacillating around this 30,000 to 35,000 range. So once again, we're seeing calls leading the dance. Will it stay that way for long? We shall see. In terms of where the action is, where you folks are lining up from a monthly expiration perspective. Remember, June was the big dog. That is now off the board. And December is still the big dog, even though July is creeping up on it. December, about 31,600 contracts, opened up about 2,600 or so from our last show. But July now fighting in there at number 2. Remember, for a while there, it was all quarterlies all the time. It was June, Sep, and Dece, and that was about it. Now, July has fought its way up to number 2, 30,600, up about 6,600 contracts from our last show. So a big jump in July. People obviously want to get very near-term exposure to what's going on out there in Bitcoin in case we have another aggressive move to the upside, to the downside. They don't want to play out in SEP or even Dece. They want to play in July. And then SEP bringing up the rear, 27,200, up about 1,400 contracts from where it was this time last show. And in terms of the notional value of the OI, as Bryan alluded to, we haven't seen a huge change in that since our last show. In fact, it's pretty much exactly the same as it was 2 weeks ago. There was about $4 billion worth of notional OI open on Deribit. Again, that's a far cry from what it was not too long ago out there as well. And coming into today's show, still about $4 billion open on Deribit. And you add in some of the other venues, close to about $4.5 billion. So not a lot of OI open out there right now, which is, just again, kind of a sign of the quiet nature of the business. And that's continued over there on the notional value of the volume over there on Deribit as well. The busiest day since our last show was June 29th. That had about 446 million worth of value changing hands that day. That's a far cry from the numbers we were seeing not too long ago, where they were regularly pinning the needle back in April and early May at about 2 billion a day, 2 billion. Now the best they can do is about 446 million. Bryan, it sounds like that doesn't come as a surprise to you that we're not seeing big numbers right now out there in terms of options volume. Sounds like you think we need another big move to really kick things into high gear.
I think we need to see interest come back around. It needs to come out of boring, something unique to come, some whales to come into the space, some institutions to come in and start playing the futures and options game again. I think to start moving it. The narrative's been really good for the space despite what happened out of China. So on the headlines, everybody's a buyer, right? But the price is still flat here, right? So somebody's in there selling this, and somebody from the inside who doesn't want to come out and say what they're doing is going to need to play the futures and the options in this. Is where I really think it needs to go first. Then the price will move after it. Speaking of Deribit, though, there's something interesting. Was the listing of the 50,000 strike for Ether? It kind of makes sense in it. It kind of shows you where, maybe people think this is going out, on the longest term listed options, but it gets some headlines, right? And these are kind of the narratives that draw people's eyes to the options market and seeing these things. Us ourselves, we can't use Deribit. We use LedgerX because it's a regulated platform, and everything we do here for us and our customers needs to be on licensed platforms. But Deribit, getting aggressive and hitting the marketing stream, that might draw some more users into the options market, knowing that things are listed that far out and that high.
Yeah, there's an impressive level. You're right. And we're going to get to ETH in a second, but we're going to break down the strikes for Bitcoin right now. But even before we get to that, I'm curious. We've had a lot of listeners write in to us, Bryan, asking about LedgerX. We had the LedgerX folks on the show not too long ago, about a month ago. So you got a little bit of insight into their platform. But what's your experience been like? You've been able to put up size out there. What about liquidity? What are your thoughts on trading options over there on LedgerX these days?
I think for the market makers, this is a great place to be. The bid-ask spreads are still pretty wide the way it goes. But, if you want to play the options market, it's LedgerX is what we like. And it's a great place to go. It's clear, it's simple. And, you can talk to them there if you need to get something done bigger or, want to know about what you're going to be doing, beyond just playing with the screen. So that's good. They got a really good team over there. And yeah, everything is good with where they're going. In this market, as it develops over the years and more people come into this space, you're going to see these bid-ask spreads tighten up.
Yeah, that's kind of some of the feedback we've been getting as well. And looking at the numbers ourselves, you go front month at the money, you can get decent bid-ask spreads. You go beyond anything outside of that, and it does get a little wide. And the LedgerX folks themselves come on and kind of acknowledge that. They kind of said their platform is primarily used for covered calls right now. That's kind of the use case for it because it is a physically settled contract, and then some protective puts, but it's still 90% covered calls. Is that pretty much what you're doing with it as well, Bryan?
No, on those, sometimes we're just taking some longer dated shots as things peel off, just to take some juice on some, buying some premium and just seeing what we can do. The longer dated strikes, like the Deck 22, 100,000 strike, just longer dated stuff, just taking a shot at that stuff out there. Not trying to time it too much on the inside.
You are encountering some serious spreads then if you're going out pretty far right now on LedgerX. Like, you have my sympathies there, sir. Let's see what's going on out there from an overall strike perspective right now. In the Bitcoin options, again, this is still on the big dog, which is Deribit right now. And the number one strike out there as we keep vacillating around the 30,000 strike isn't the 30,000 strike. It's actually the 40,000 strike still. A little over 9,000 contracts open. That's up about 1,600 from our last show 2 weeks ago. And then getting back to some of the outlandish strikes that Bryan was just talking about. Number two is still the par strike, aka the 100,000 strike. It is still 7,300 contracts open. Nothing has really changed out there over the last couple of weeks, but it's still enough for the number two position. So folks do like the, dare I say it, the optimistic strikes out there in crypto, and that persists still in Bitcoin. Number three is the 20,000 strike, 6,800 contracts. That's down slightly from our last show. Number four is the 50,000 strike with about 6,600 contracts open. Again, that's down slightly from our last show. And bringing up the rear there, the top five, finally, all the way down to the bottom of the top five, we get the 30,000 strike, a strike which we've danced around and even blown through a few times since our last show. 6,000 contracts almost exactly open out there. Bryan, you mentioned kind of the big stuff over there at CME. Not a lot going up over there as well. The options have been pretty quiet over the course of the past couple of weeks. The busiest day they had out there from a contract volume perspective was the 8th of July with about 38 contracts, so not a ton. Remember, that is a 5X contract, but still not a ton lighting it up. The OI is not even 900 contracts out there. In terms of the futures, the OI has dropped there as well. It's down to about 7,000 from 8,000 on our last show. And the busiest day was on the 6th of July with about 8,000 contracts open. Again, similar story on the micro Bitcoin futures as well. That OI is down about 5,000 to 16,000 from our last show was about 21,000. And the busiest day we saw since our last show was about 9,000 contracts going up out there. Bryan, you mentioned you kind of use LedgerX a lot. Is there a reason why you're not gravitating towards the futures and or the options over there at CME?
It's just more from a relationship standpoint and the way we built the business and knowing these guys and kind of using platforms. We also use Genesis quite a bit and Gemini for our other platforms and some other stuff. So it kind of fits in that realm of platforms like that, not so much, NYSE listed or CME. It just kind of fits with the suite of partners that we have to do business with.
And you know what else fits with our show, listeners? It's the altcoin universe. So let's get to it.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, the portion of the show where we go beyond the big dog that is Bitcoin and explore what's lighting up the rest of the altcoin universe. Let's make a stop first, as we are wont to do, looking at the overall top 10 market cap out there. Bryan alluded to there are 1,100 or so listed out there right now. We're just going to break down the top 10. Remember, take these overall market caps with a tasty grain of salt. There's some fudging going on with the numbers, but I think the rankings have a little bit more relevance out here. Number 10, it is Uniswap with about $11.5 billion worth of market cap. Number 9, Polkadot, $14.3 billion. Number 8, USD Coin, $26 billion. Number 7, it's Doge, still lurking in the top 10 there at about $26.8 billion. Number 6, our old friend XRP, down to about $28.8 billion. Number 5, Cardano at about almost $42 billion out there. Number 4, Binance Coin, $48 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, holding firm at number 3, $62 and about $250 million. Number 2 is it's ETH, $236 billion. And rounding out the top 10 out there, Bitcoin, a pale shadow of its former self now, $621 billion. Doesn't seem like that long ago we were talking well north of the 1T level, but not so much today there, listeners. And ETH coming into showtimes had quite the interesting dance over the course of the past few weeks as well. At the end of our last show, it was a little bit shy of 2,100, about 2,087. Coming into today's show, not that far below it, about 2,026. So you're talking only 61 handle net move since our last show. Of course, we saw more swings around and below that below the 2,000 level, up to about 2,400 just over the course of the past week. Beyond that, we saw it get even higher out there. So we have seen some interesting moves, even though net over the course of the past couple of weeks, kind of quiet, only 61 handles out there. And Brian, you mentioned earlier on, you get a lot of calls out there for the altcoin beyond just the Bitcoin. How high up is ETH on the roster these days? Are people starting to hit you up about this?
ETH was a big narrative for us at the beginning of last year and into the summer, and specifically with our model portfolio that we run. That's our discretionary account. It's kind of like our fund. And we still like it to be the narrative of what's going on in our portfolio, but there's been a lot of reach deeper down, even out of the top 10 in names and requests for research, advice, ways to put positions on, a lot of which, though, we still advise against not investing in at this time, at least getting into a base. But yeah, the requests, the last, I'd say 2 months have definitely been really, out of the top 5 and even past the top 10.
Yeah, it does seem like the quote unquote success of Doge, Brian, out there has just awakened this entire universe of, I won't use what the epithet people put around them, but a lot of, let's say, less valuable coins out there, Brian, seem to be on people's radar in the wake of Doge. So it sounds like you're seeing something similar in the financial advisor space, Brian.
It is, yeah. And coming back to earlier in our conversation, it's, these advisors that we're educating, it does seem like Bitcoin is a bit boring for them. Like they know a bit about it. They might feel like they're almost close to being a fiduciary for it, but yet they want to reach or have something more exciting to talk about with their clients. But it's dangerous. It's really dangerous. I mean, as we all saw, these altcoins come off 70%, in the pullback, 80%. A lot of them had a hard time rebounding, and they will continue to drown out and go lower, especially if there's, if the vol spikes and we get another peak, a flash down, 10, 20%, these could get really, really damaged again, where Bitcoin could bounce back in a couple hours. Ether could be back up again, but you're just left, holding the bag on these altcoins. And we'd really suggest guys just kind of avoid these and stick to what's in the top here and understand that Bitcoin is really the core position.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian. I couldn't hear you. I was too busy taking the kids' college fund out of Doge. All right, let's keep rolling here. Unfortunately, that isn't a joke. I think some people are actually going that way out there. Let's see what ETH is up to since our last show from a vol perspective. Remember, ETH has been structurally more volatile than Bitcoin for a while, and we're seeing some of that narrative continue out there. On our last show, listeners, we had vol, actually pretty frothy. Vol out there in all things ETH was at about, looks like a 127, and I'm sorry, it was about a 111. What about a 111 on our last show? And coming into today's show, we're at about a 94 and a half out there. So vol has come off. It's still frothy. It's still threatening the triple digits, but unfortunately, not enough to really get things going out there. In terms of the SKEW, on our last show, we had a negative 3.5 out there, listeners. So a little bit of a negative SKEW hanging out there in ETH. And coming into today's show, we're looking at about a positive swing out there of up to about almost 2.5 out there. So a pretty decent swing out there, all things considered, from an overall ETH perspective. Unfortunately, the same thing that's plaguing the Bitcoin options from kind of a light volume perspective, still kind of the deal out there in ETH options as well. We're not seeing a heck of a lot of paper on the tape. In fact, since our last show, the busiest day was June 29th with a fairly paltry 184 million worth of notional volume going up. That's a pale shadow. I mean, we saw back in May, 1 billion days kind of regularly out there, and nothing even close to that since. In terms of OI out there on the ETH front, coming into today's show, we're seeing, again, calls leading the dance out there right now, again, for a similar reason structurally for what we saw out there. In Bitcoin, we have sold off aggressively from around the 4,500 top out there in ETH. And so a lot of the downside strikes, we have blown through them. There are fewer than people want to put on right now. So calls leading the dance. Not quite 2-1, but pretty darn close to it out there right now. 661,000 calls are open out there in ETH. It's up about 41,000 from our last show. Puts, a lot less, about 380,000 puts open right now. That's up about 12,000 out there. And again, in terms of the notional value of that OI out there, it's similar story to Bitcoin. It's kind of unched from our last show 2 weeks ago. There was about 2 billion worth of notional value open on our last show, and about $2 billion today. Looking to where folks are hanging their hat right now from an overall expiration perspective, where you're lining up. ETH has always kind of been a quarterly dominated product, and that continues to be the case, even though July has snuck in there. DEESH is still number one with 309,000 contracts, opens up about 19,000. July, though, fighting its way into the top three there. That's at about 228,000 contracts, opens up about 25,000 from our last show. So that's the biggest increase of our top three here. And SEP bringing up the rear there with 225,000, up about 21,000 from our last show. And Bryan, you were just talking about crazy strikes being opened in ETH. Unfortunately, none of them making it into our top five right now. But there are some interesting strikes still open. In fact, right now, the still top number one strike out there in ETH, listeners, is the 5,000 strike. That didn't seem that far away not too long ago. These days, a little bit of a different story. There's 63,000 contracts open there. That's actually up since our last show. It's up about 10,000. So new opening positioning on the 5,000 strike since our last show. That's interesting. Then we get down to number two. It's kind of still these legacy positions that still dominate a lot of ETH. The 480 strike, still 46,000 of those open. Remember, not too long ago, there were 60-odd thousand of the 400s as well. Those have since gone the way of the dodo, thankfully. Number three, 1,600 strike. There's about 45,000 contracts open there. It's up about 2,200 from our last show. Number four, number five, we got some newcomers coming in now. Number four, we got the 3,000 strike finally fighting its way into the top five with about 40,000 contracts open. And number five, we've got the 4,000 strike with about 32,000 contracts open. Unfortunately, Bryan, no, actually looks like the OI actually isn't that bad. I'm looking right now. Well, we pulled it up before showtime, and it seems like there's about almost 15,000 contracts open on that 50,000 strike. So it seems like, Bryan, some folks, they didn't just list a strike for no reason. Some folks are actually trading there, Bryan.
Yeah, and that's coming up quick. That's March 2022, so that's not that far away. And to look at like the 50,000 mark for ETH, to play that strike, it's really something that could be for the proof of stake really taking over and it taking some real dominance from Bitcoin and being, the next alternative store of value to really get out there.
Yeah, it's hard to think what it would take to make that come to pass. But then again, not that
25x.
Yeah, what would drive that in the marketplace would be interesting. But it wasn't that long ago, Bryan, on the show. I think it was last September, October on the show. We were mocking someone who loaded up on the 30,000 calls in January in Bitcoin. That seemed absurd. That was like a 3x move in Bitcoin. And of course, we all know what happened in the beginning of the year. So I mock some of these crazy strikes with a little bit more caution now, Bryan, than I did, let's say, maybe a year ago here on the show. Where, these are crazy. Now, hey, an interesting strike. What do you guys think about that 50,000 strike list? I think we probably got to hit the 5,000 strike first. Maybe make that one come to pass. Maybe that's what we're seeing. Maybe we're seeing the 5,000, 50,000 vertical going up. What do you think about that, listeners? ETH futures wise over there at CME, remember they're kind of the latest addition to the CME crypto offering. Again, this is still kind of a beefy, I think it's 50 ETH. So still a pretty big product. They got to get the micro going out there as well. But the OI has about 3,200 contracts, and the busiest day we've seen was actually July 6th with about 4,763 contracts going up. Outside of that, let's look at some of the other altcoin you folks like to watch. Ripple down about almost 2 cents from our last show. It's not a huge move in XRP either. Bitcoin Cash down about 22, and Bitcoin SV down about 18 from our last show out there. And of course, the infamous Doge off nearly 5 cents, a whole nickel since our last show, kind of hovering around that 20-cent level here as we're coming into the end of the show. But I know you folks have some questions on your brain, so without further ado, it's time to answer your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, we got a bunch of questions here, but you guys know if you're on the pro side or if you're listening live, you guys get bumped to the top of the list. Just like my boy Luigi, one of our pro members, he says, I know Bitcoin is kind of a currency play and Ether is kind of a blockchain play. What other crypto do you see coming to the forefront in the future? Interesting question. Bryan, you kind of mentioned earlier, a lot of the advisors you're dealing with right now are asking, it sounds like, a similar question. They're looking beyond the big two of Bitcoin and ETH, and they want to know what else is on the horizon. It sounds like you're steering them away from that. But if there were some other altcoin that were kind of on your radar beyond Bitcoin and ETH, what would you say they are right now?
For an alternative store of value and just a place to be totally decentralized, there's nothing that's going to change us from saying Bitcoin. It's the best that's out there, the most widely distributed, well-known, market cap, trading liquidity. It's got the most assets built around it, the community. You can't try to look for something else to replace it as an alternative store of value. Everything else below that, if you're going to try to make a case for it, it's going to be speculation. And you're going to want to hope for some outperformance, which you might find, but then you're going to have to time that right to get out of. And as for ETH, it's a bit getting confused here a little bit between the utility side of it and as they go and they do the upgrades for proof of stake and maybe the alternative store of value case. So you've got to watch how this plays out for ETH. But then coming outside of Ethereum and the network, you always hear about the Ethereum killers that are out there and who's going to create something that transacts faster, lower fees. But the people involved with Ethereum and consensus and these developers, they all know these things and they want to make this better and they want to improve it. So in order to deviate away and make a play outside of Ethereum, you got to really know, hey, is there going to be real adoption of this from a utility standpoint? And we struggle to find that. We research a lot of coins and we try to do fundamental analysis on it. And the data that's out there to analyze over all of these coins is really hard to find. And you got to put bits and pieces together and reference points and different verifications and tokenomics together to really come together. And it's just tough to make a case. So, if you're going to dive into these and look at something outside of Bitcoin and ETH, you got to go everywhere. You got to put the time in. Yeah, I don't think anything short of 10 hours would get it. It's probably more in the 20 plus, maybe even 40. Looking who the creators are, where they were before, what they're building and why, what their use case is, and seeing really if there's a marketing play to get some adoption out there and to get assets built on it.
Yeah, Luigi, we've been asking similar questions to a lot of our guests here on the show for a long time. And it does seem like if there is a consensus, pun intended, around other things, it does seem like to be ETH related in that ETH ecosystem, that entire kind of DeFi ecosystem that has kind of sprung forth from ETH over the course of the last few years in particular out there. So I encourage you to go back, check out some of our archive shows, a lot of our guests. I know the folks at Genesis are deep down that rabbit hole. So the ones with Greg are good ones to check out as well, because they're up on all the latest DeFi projects and which ones they think are kind of leading the pack from that perspective. So if you do want to get outside of the big dogs of Bitcoin and ETH, if the ETH 50,000 strike isn't exciting you don't think we're getting there anytime soon, then maybe some of these other DeFi projects may be an interesting place to go. But just be warned, like Brian said, it is a bit of a rabbit hole. You can spend a lot of time checking out each of these different products and what they're doing and what forked from what. And there's a lot there, but it is interesting. And if you are intrigued by this space, there could be some opportunities out there as well. All right, let's keep rolling here. Next question. I like this handle, Mac Attack. He may get the award for best handle of the week out here. Mac Attack wants to know. He says, I think he's got a silly one. He says, "Hey guys, I saw this trending and I thought of you. Looks like there are some things Magic Tom can't do after all." He sent a link to, I believe this is Market Watch. I'll leave it to them to break this down. They like this kind of stuff. But they point out that Tom Brady kind of infamously a few months back, he joined the meme craze out there for crypto, in particular the laser eyes. It was mostly around Doge, it seemed like the laser eyes thing, but you could kind of apply that to all crypto. It's kind of just a general crypto love fest. So Tom Brady got in on that, and he changed his profile picture to the laser eyes as well. And unfortunately for him, his timing was not so good. The crypto space as a whole, well, Bitcoin itself was off about 40% since he changed his profile picture. Crypto overall market cap down nearly 50% from that level. So it sounds like Tom Brady even conceded this. Looks like a few weeks ago he came out and tweeted, "All right, the laser eyes things didn't work. Anyone else have any other ideas?" So what do you think there, Brian? Even Tom Brady, legend that he is, he couldn't make the right call in Bitcoin there, Brian.
Yeah, I like Tom Brady. I've always been a fan of his, and even the move, and congrats to him on all he's done. I mean, as a role model, he's somebody to look up to, and the work ethic is unparalleled. I think, though, he might have gotten some better levels, so that might be something on the inside, but we won't know, and he knows only. And I have a feeling some of those deals were in the works for some time being. And then, when the announcement happens, but if you did get the top, then it's going to be a learning lesson like a lot of us went through on, how to have a strong hand, and not be weak in these environments.
You think he got the Buffett treatment? So when he calls up the desk, he gets the Brady price as opposed to what you and I get?
Yeah, I'm sure he's getting pitched by Bitcoin for several years now, and he might have been building a position sooner, a lot earlier than we think he was.
Yeah, we'll trade you some Bitcoin to change your eyes to laser eyes. What do you think? That's not a bad trade. Yeah. I think I would do that trade. So even though his position is down, he's probably still up a lot there. Whoever sent that in. Oh, yeah, Mac Attack. All right, we'll wrap it up with this one here, Brian. Kind of an intriguing one. It's along the lines of a lot of questions we've had along this subject matter and along these lines for a while now. This one comes from Trevor. He wants to know, will it take the approval of the Bitcoin ETF in the U.S. to really push Bitcoin back up from the 30,000 level back to the 65,000 level and above? Obviously, Brian, this is kind of a hot button issue here. We've seen approvals as close as Canada, so our neighbors to the north have jumped into the Bitcoin fray from an ETF perspective. Haven't really seen much movement on that here in the U.S. So maybe let's start there. What are your thoughts on kind of the outlook for this? Are you optimistic that we'll see some movement on this front, maybe even on this year? And then related question here from Trevor, do you think that's what it's going to take to get us back up to those 65,000 levels?
It's more of a question, how much time do you have? Because I could go on for hours and hours, and we've wrote about this a bunch in our monthly newsletters to clients, and feel free to reach out to us if you want to become a subscriber to that newsletter. But yeah, we've talked about this quite a bit. There's over 15 now ETFs pending. Kathy Wood's putting hers in now. I don't think we see a Bitcoin ETF inside this year. It's probably later down the line. If there's anybody that's got a bit of a head start, it's probably Grayscale in converting the trust into what they want to do. And Barry Silbert even was able to capture what would be the ETF name of BTC. So a little bit of a chess move on his part to do pretty impressive tactics for that standpoint to quarter himself in the market. But as for the ETF being the instrument that moves the price back to all-time highs, no, you don't need the ETF to do that. Once Bitcoin starts moving and the offers start gapping out and the supply on the sell side, takes a break and gets just cleared out and through, this thing just vacuums and goes. So it doesn't take much. It's just the forces to push it. You're going to need the news narrative to be in the favorable direction, and off we go. Some more headlines, some more CNBC, and we'll push back up and through to all-time highs. Won't need the ETF.
Interesting. I like it there. So not optimistic on the ETF front, but it sounds like to you, Brian, that's not the biggest driver out there. Unfortunately, that music means we're coming to the end of it here. Got some more chats or comments in the chats, I should say, from another member. Mr. Unlimited says, I think Tom Brady's pockets will weather the storm of Bitcoin. Yeah, you're probably right there, Mr. And if not his wife's. I know she had some pretty deep pockets as well. So one of them will weather the Bitcoin storm, I'm sure, just fine. Unfortunately, that's the end of the show for this week here, listeners. Brian, I want to thank you for ably staying on, fighting your way through the entirety of the show here. You did a great job there in my co-host seat for the entirety of the show. And before we go, Brian, if folks want to kick the tires and check out what you folks have to offer over there at DAIM, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, the website's daim.io. You can also email us at hq@daim.io. We have a great newsletter that we put out every month. And more importantly, Mark, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy going on your show. You carry it with a lot of personality and excitement, so I love it. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you joining us today. Check it out over there, Digital Asset Investment Management. And, of course, you know where to go to learn more about all of the good stuff there in the world of Bitcoin and ETH analytics. Genesis Volatility, gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. On behalf of everybody over there in Genesis land and Brian and indeed myself, I thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, and subscribing. And, of course, for listening live and sending in those questions. Keep them coming. Love to hear from all of you. Everybody on the membership side, tomorrow got a great pro Q&A, easy for me to say, a great pro Q&A coming up with Mr. Dan Graham. So get those questions in now. If you listen to some of Dan's previous appearances, He can answer a question, so we may not get to that many on the show. He'll give you some details, so get him in early if you want to participate on that one. That's going to be a little bit earlier tomorrow as well. It's at noon Central tomorrow on the live front. Of course, if you're listening after the fact, you can check it out on the Pro podcast feed there as well. And of course, then we're back again Wednesday, Education Wednesday, Bootcamp Options Playbook Radio, Thursday, Double Dose of TWIFO and the Option Block, Friday, Double Dose of Vol Views and Options Oddities. Then we're back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.